Alright guys, today we're going to start a new sculpture. I'm putting in a bag like this just to stretch it out. You shouldn't sculpt directly on an unprepared wood surface, so just putting in a little bit of a plastic bag. It's a trash bag. Afterwards I actually reuse these. So this is grog clay. I've been using a lot more grog, so I usually like to put a platform where my sculpture is going to sit. This one is a little hard, but I like to keep it all one level. And I had the idea of sculpting a skull. And normally for something like this size, I probably would put some sort of armature inside just to support it. But I thought because the skull is kind of resting on the base, I don't need it. I wasn't sure exactly if I was going to sculpt the jaw, but eventually I did add the jaw. So now I'm just drawing it in, and I'm really playing around with what I want to show in the sculpture. So at this point I was thinking maybe putting the skull looking up.
The noise, got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back, junkies in the alley with the baseball bat. I tried to get away, but I couldn't get far, cause a man with a tow truck repossessed my car. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. Standing on the front stoop, hanging out the window, watching all the cars go by, roaring as the breezes blow. A crazy lady living in a bag, eating out of garbage pail.
So human skulls are extremely difficult to do. If you haven't sculpted a human skull, it's extremely hard. And the reference that you get online, you just don't know if it's a real skull or it's a plastic skull. But it tends to have a lot more like yellowish and like hard detail on real skulls. And real human skulls are very expensive to buy. So I wanted to basically sculpt a skull because I wanted to use it as reference for a future project, which I wanted to do a welding project with steel and sculpt a skull. But if I did it with clay first, I could just have that as reference. But I think what I'm going to do with the sculpture is create something different. And I am asking you guys to post up in the comments below, what do you think I should do with a skull? There's a couple of motifs that I wanted to do. I wanted to do one where you would have a snake kind of circling around the base of the skull and kind of crawling inside one of the eye sockets, but I think that might be a little bit too stereotypical. A friend of mine also told me about potentially putting horns on the skull as if it's like some sort of mini devil. So the horns are tiny. So I'm not really sure. There's another motif that I really like. It's a owl kind of resting against the skull and kind of looking at the skull. I kind of like that idea. It's a little bit more subtle. But back to the skull anatomy is extremely difficult, and my goal here is to have enough detail that I can use as reference as well. So I'm using my fancy silicone brush here. It's silicone tool and it works really well. I really like this tool. But if you get stuff from a ceramics place like I got, you're limited to a very distinct shape, and I tend to like flatter shapes. So those are harder to get. So I did add the jawline. And by the way, there are small differences, but very easily noticeable between races with the skull. So keep that in mind. And of course, there's going to be a difference between female and male skulls. This backside of the tool really works well with the wood. So I removed the skull, and usually I never do this. Once I put the sculpture down, I don't want to remove it. But because it's a skull, it's kind of like easy to kind of manipulate, and I'm not really sure what I'll do with the base just yet. So I was thinking about curling in a snake around the base and kind of like twirling it around or adding some sort of animal. So post up in the comments below. I'd be interested in knowing what you guys think I should do. And by the way, I have a Beavis and Butthead sculpture in the back, you can see there, and my Hellboy sculpture hanging on the wall. I've been doing the Beavis and Butthead. I'm going to make a mold of it. So eventually I do plan on selling it on Etsy. I have my Etsy shop and the links below. So look at that. I am selling my Hellboy copies as well. I'm having some proportional issues with the skull. So I just took some measurements. It's easy enough to break it down into 3/4. So I'm digging in a little bit into the skull because I need the clay for making the skull a little bit wider. And I also don't want the skull to be that heavy. So this little point, you can kind of feel it in the back of your skull. That's the occipital protuberance. And it's a really good landmark for drawing and sculpting the human figure. That little bony point there is the mastoid process. That's where your sternocleidomastoid goes to. You know, there's something really cool about sculpting with water-based clay. Like when you have clay this wet, it does feel like you're painting. You know, I don't think the oil-based guys get this feeling from water-based clay, but I've tried quite a few. I even got some monster clay that I've been like using, and I like it. I like oil-based clay, but there's a certain je ne sais quoi about water-based clay that is undeniable. There's a painterly effect that you can really achieve, you know, just by leaving things a little bit undone. It feels really almost like virtuoso to do it. That's my new silicone brush that I really like. So if you want the clay to be a little bit softer, you just put a little bit of water and it just kind of melts away. It's really cool. And then if you want to get details, just use a bristle brush and some water. And there we go. And I'm actually emphasizing some of the structures of the skull because I plan on putting in more detail, but certain detail like the sutures, I want the clay or the skull to harden up a little bit because it'll be a little bit easier. When it's this soft, it's a little bit harder. So those are the sutures there. I'm kind of separating them a little bit. That's mostly for now. But yeah, that's pretty much the first session of the skull. I'm kind of having some issues, I think, more with the jawline, but I plan on fixing that pretty soon. And I'm not sure exactly the theme that I'm going to go with just yet, but if you have any ideas, just post up in the comments below. And thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.